for see if I got it for 2 seconds here.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But Badger fans, we actually just went live. We're working through some tech issues, so we are all good here. But we have big news to talk about. We got Jon McNamara jumping on the show. We got to talk about the big news, right? Nick, our Mason Posa commits to the Badgers. Let's go. Let's fire the cannons. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. Really do appreciate everybody in the chat, everybody in the comments. We are fighting through a few technical issues here, but hopefully we're going to see it through and it's not going to be a big deal. We got Jon McNamara joining the show, obviously over at Badger Blitz Rivals, one of the long-tenured members of this recruiting committee, our community. Jon, Mason Posa commits. How big of a win is this for Wisconsin?
Significant. This was a guy that was on top of Wisconsin's board for a good chunk of time, and I think I've wrote it a few times. I think this was atop Luke Fickell's personal recruiting board, just because of the fit and the wrestling background, everything that kind of goes in there, a guy on the defensive side of the ball. So, a substantial win for Wisconsin to go out and get a national kid, a big four-star kid, and a guy, like I said, I think that the staff feels he fits in perfectly with what they want to do on the defensive side of the ball. And it's another addition to an inside linebacker room that has really been revamped since the end of that 2023 season. So you're throwing another big, talented kid in there, and certainly someone that Wisconsin feels is going to have a lot of success in that program.
Well, you haven't been on the show before when we just got to commit, so we got to fire the cannons. We're going to hit that. Another one's coming to Madison. Fire the recruiting cannons.
Another one is headed to Madison on Wisconsin.
It is a tradition that we hold very dear here. Talk about the recruitment here. So I think from your standpoint, you maybe heard something different, and then maybe what was the last 48 hours of this recruitment like?
Well, I'll take it back to his official visit, and the people that we talked to. He committed on Sunday while he was in Madison, and that was significant at the time, because really going into that visit, nothing was set in stone, right? And this wasn't like someone who was a Wisconsin lean, and he was just kind of, the official visit was a formality. It was very much like, hey, Wisconsin, might actually be trailing a little bit and behind Oregon and Texas A&M. And so, like I said, he delivered that news while he was on campus, and then it kind of seemed very straightforward there. And then, I check in with people daily. And then I talked to someone yesterday, which was Wednesday, and the feeling was a little bit different, and something that I didn't anticipate, where it wasn't completely a Wisconsin lock to end up there. And that's kind of what I thought. That's what we were preparing for. That's what we were writing stories about. That's what we were just kind of waiting to hit publish on. So it was something I didn't anticipate, but again, it was coming from a pretty good source. So Wisconsin felt better this morning when I talked to the same person, and they felt like it would eventually wind up with Posa committing to Wisconsin, but this was not a done deal. And this, as of 10 o'clock this morning, the staff didn't know 100% for sure from Posa if he was going to wind up at Wisconsin. So there's twists and turns in recruiting. Every recruitment's a little bit different. Some are very straightforward. Others take ups and downs, but in the end, Wisconsin got the guy they want, and I know that staff is ecstatic right now.
And let's talk about this. Obviously, Posa is the big news here, but we're also going to get into official visits, what's coming up next for Wisconsin. But let's talk about Posa a little bit more, just the film. When you watch him on film, and you're a guy who's seen a lot of it, what stands out with Posa, and how high is the upside here?
Well, he's violent. I think that's the first thing that kind of jumps when you watch the film. He's dominating at that level in New Mexico, which is kind of to be expected. It's not the highest level of football ever, right? But again, what he shows on tape is a big, rangy athlete who attacks the football. He's going to fit in very well in the defense Wisconsin run. I think we have him as an outside linebacker, but like I said, he projects to the inside. I've heard a lot of Jaheim Thomas comparisons where, I think you'll see Jaheim this year start up in the inside, but on obvious passing down, you can line them up on the edge as well. So that versatility they like, with Posa as well. And then the wrestling background where he's a 3-time state title guy. I mean, that kind of stuff translates. And that's the kind of stuff that made him very attractive to Wisconsin. So, a high ceiling guy. I know that when he gave his video, he talked about, being a first round NFL draft pick. I'd like to see a little bit what he does in college before I talk about, the NFL. But again, this is a kid who ranked up, atop Wisconsin's board regardless of position. So he's an extremely big gift for the defense, but, just in this class as a whole right now.
Let's talk about recruiting with the schools like Oregon. So Mason Posa guy, obviously Oregon was after, Texas A&M, big time schools. What does this say about Wisconsin's recruiting effort to be able to go out of state, fend off a school like Oregon, who has all the resources coming off an incredible season? What does this say about this staff's ability to recruiting and land prospects?
Yeah, I think it says that, we've talked about this before. They're not afraid to get in these battles. And if you go back with Posa, Alabama came in and USC came in, and some of the premier programs in the country. So this isn't a staff that's afraid to get dirty in these type of recruiting battles. And, Oregon is, they recruit as well as just about anyone in the country, and they have resources to go after these type of kids, to go after the top athletes in the country. So it's a huge win there for, the Wisconsin coaching staff and really everyone involved, the recruiting department, Max Steinecker, everyone that was involved in this. It's a substantial win because, Oregon and Texas A&M, in terms of what they're able to provide, financially with NIL, with everything that goes into that. I mean, they're probably near the top of the college football landscape right now. So it's a significant win for Wisconsin to go out in a place that they also don't really recruit, right? I mean, they don't have a whole lot of ties to New Mexico. This isn't like they kept an in-state kid home. They won a national recruiting battle against some powerhouses, and they're kind of reaping the rewards right now.
You've been doing this a long time. Badger fans are very, very stoked about the recruiting efforts last year into this year, right? Is it hyperbole to say that this program has, in the last couple of years, turned a corner in the recruiting standpoint, or is it a little too early to say that?
Well, I think you'd always like to see the results on the field, right? But if you're talking strictly with the battles that they're getting into, the guys that they're landing, the schools that they're competing against, the type of athlete that they're getting, and where they are going to wind up in the rankings, yeah, it's a little bit different, right? I mean, I think Paul Christ in general recruited better than people likely anticipated, but this group is obviously taking it to the next step, and a lot of that has to do with that recruiting department. Max and Pat and Casey, the work that those people have done and their staff have done, the evaluations that they've done. And like I just said, the guys that they're willing to go and fight for, I think, is a little bit different than the previous staff. So I think you're starting to see those results. Again, it doesn't matter what they're ranked or anything. It matters what they do on the field. But, in terms of just what I do and cover recruiting and those day-to-day type of things in recruiting, they're doing an exceptional job.
Will Hanna in the chat says he reminds me of a certain former USC backer. Not saying he'll be that good, but his film was scary. That's kind of the film I thought of when I saw Mason Powell. It kind of felt like Tackett Curtis's high school film in a way, just blowing everybody up at a little bit of a lower level of competition.
Yeah, that violence. Yeah, absolutely. If you turn on Tackett Curtis, it just, they line them up all over the place. A lot of times just 10 yards away from the football and just say, go fly to the ball. Just go as fast as you can and blow the guy up, as soon as you see him go somewhere. So you see a little bit of that with Post. I think that, there are a lot of similarities there, in terms of not just what they put on tape, but, in terms of their backgrounds and, how much Wisconsin invested into each player. And obviously Tackett, Wisconsin came up just short, but then got him in the end. This kind of had a feeling like that could end up that way, a couple of weeks ago, before official visits, that Wisconsin might come up just short, but obviously that's not the case. And, they got posted in the end. They're very excited about it.
We got a bunch of comments in the chat. We got a couple hundred people watching right now. Hugh Scallon says he's watching live as my youngest son comes into the room. Hugh Scallon said he's watching live in Connecticut right now. You got to be quiet, Ham. All right, we're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the 2025, some of the official visitors that just committed, what Jon thinks about those guys, plus what's next for the Badgers on today's Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at eBay Motors. eBay Motors remains the number one source for all of your car parts, everything you need. Listen, from rims to radio parts to car mats, whatever it is, over there on eBay Motors. Find all the parts you need from the comfort of your home over at eBay Motors. You're not going to find a better spot to get car parts. Don't leave your home. Don't put on clothes even. Go get every part you need over at eBay Motors. Shop from the comfort of your home. eBay Motors, eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Brought to you by our friends over at eBay Motors. Go on, Ham. You got to close the door, bud. All right, Jon, let's keep going here. Let's bring on Jon McNamara again. Definitely take an opportunity, Jon. Talk about your site, everything, all the coverage that you guys have going on during this really busy period.
Yeah, BadgerBlitz.com. You can find me on X. You can find me on Instagram. I don't know many other sites. I don't do TikTok or Snapchat or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, June is just a wild month. A handful of commitments. They got guys on campus this weekend. If you want to know the guys that they have coming to the Badger barbecue for the 2026 class, which is Saturday, you can find those inside the Badger Gen as well. Just a lot of nuggets that we sprinkle around whenever I get to talk to someone who knows what's going on. That you can find that in the Badgers Den too. So we'd love to have you. We'd love to give you a shot here. Get you a shot with recruiting and take you right into the 2024 season, which is right around the corner.
Love it, man. And I appreciate everybody's patience as my son comes in. That is the magic of live television. But let's talk about the official. So Mason Posa, obviously the big one here, but you haven't been on for a few weeks. We've had a couple commitments. That group that committed through the official visits, you have Logan Powell and Davenport and Jahmare Washington, Torin Pettaway flipped. Who's the biggest recruiting win out of that group?
Oh, you can make a case for just about all of them. I think Powell was probably my biggest surprise. I don't know if he was the biggest win though. I look at a guy like Pettaway, and I think keeping him inside the state, flipping him, which I think a lot of people expected, myself included, I think it was just kind of a matter of time. I think that's significant for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the biggest one, keeping in-state talent home, which is still something that, Luke Fickell is working through, and he's working to build those relationships. And, you don't want to see a kid who lives 10 minutes away end up at Minnesota, especially in a position of need like the defensive line. So, all those things kind of combined, I would likely say Pettaway, even though that wasn't, I think if you've been paying attention, wasn't super dramatic. It was like, this is like a Rob Booker 2.0 thing. When is it going to happen? So it happened a little bit earlier than Booker. But again, position of need, in-state kid, 6'6", 285 defensive lineman. That just doesn't happen inside the state a lot. So I think that one was a significant one for the Badgers to make sure they took care of business there for a kid that, you should take care of business with.
Out of that group coming in, who do you think is maybe the most underrated, underranked, and not even necessarily just in the recruiting rankings, just from this national standpoint, people need to talk about this guy more? I have one before you. Let me see if you agree with mine. I think it's Davenport. I think Davenport has unique physical skills.
Are you talking about the class in general, or just
the group that just popped out of the official visit group?
Yeah, you can make a case for Davenport. A kid that played tight end for a while, flipped over to tackle. You've seen some of those situations before where, a kid just can't stay at 240 forever. His fate is 300 pounds, with those tight ends. So yeah, I could see Davenport. I'd probably go Najee Davis, I'm sorry. He's a kid. I got a chance to talk to his coach. I got a chance to talk to him a little bit. Talk to people close to his recruitment. Wisconsin feels like they got one of the better tight ends in the country in him. And if you look at the film, before his injury, he's a big athletic pass catching option that should fit in very well with Wisconsin. But you watch the tape too. Like he's not afraid to get in there and get dirty and block. And I talked to his coach, and he's like, one, he was a basketball player, growing up, and once we were able to kind of get the hoop dreams out of his head, he played defense in football, and then he put him at tight end, and he really kind of took off there. So, if he doesn't, get that knee injury. Maybe his recruitment's a little bit different. You know, if you look at the schools that were there, Wisconsin, Kansas, I think Purdue was there, maybe a couple others that were there in the end. You know, it wasn't a super high level, high profile recruitment, but I think that, you know, in terms of how Wisconsin feels about him, they feel like they got an absolute steal in Davis. And I think he fits what they want to do exceptionally well.
How good do you think, looking at last year's class and this year's class, I wanted to ask you a few positions. Which group are you a little higher on? Defensive backs from the 24 class or the 25 class? Now you've added Raheem Stroud, you've added Jahmare Washington.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I really like that corner group from 2024. And so that, you know, a guy like David Lucas, we talked about that last time he popped on. He's a unique athlete that Wisconsin was able to add. But, you know, like if you get Gentry and somehow are able to get like a guy like Trey Poteet, you know, then we might be having a different conversation. I think Gentry is very much in play. And I think Poteet, even though as of today I'd say Tennessee, I think that he is very much in play as well too. So, you know, there's some time. So I guess, you know, let's talk about that in December. But right now I guess I'd side towards that cornerback class from 2024, but you know, Jahmire Scott, right? I mean, he's I think the highest rated kid that Wisconsin has right now. You know, he's kind of blown up this spring in terms of different guys getting eyeballs on him and the rankings that he's seen kind of explode there. So I really like that group. But you know, I guess we can have that conversation in December once they put the finishing touches on it.
So similar question here, and probably a similar answer to some degree. Like there's still work to be done. But I really thought that offensive line group from last year was phenomenal. We've already seen Kevin Haywood come in, but I like the entire group. I think Mandel, Corey on the inside, obviously Jensen was size on the outside, Colin Cubberly. Do you think this group is shaping up to be in that same tier? Again, knowing there's potential work to do there, but.
Yeah, if you finish with Hardy Watts, then I'll sit down and have a real deep dive into that. Because then I think it gets real interesting because I don't know. I've been on a few different things. I don't know if I told you or someone different, whatever. But like, if you get Watts, I think over the last two classes, like Kevin Haywood would be my pick as the top guy, but Watts might be number two if they were to get him just behind Haywood. I think he's that talented, and I know that you love these guys, Ryan, but like I'm super high on Emerson Mandel, really high on Ryan Corey, but like Watts, after talking to some people, after watching the film a few times, like, he was described to me as Boston nasty, and then you watch the film, and yeah, I don't know what that means. I'm not from Boston, but I'm guessing it's like some, I don't know, an Irish, angry, go out and kick people's ass type of description there. So yeah, I think if they could close with Watts, then you can kind of compare those classes, and I think either one you can make a really strong argument for from 2024 or this upcoming 2025 class.
Yeah, listen, I live in New England. I've been out here for a while. We're moving back, but you're too nice to be out here in New England. So yes, Boston nasty. Like there's a certain type of edge in the northeastern area. Let me ask you this. So, and 715 Badger says, it doesn't matter. We're creating depth. That's what matters. We talk about that all the time. Stacking talent, right? You got to stack talent class to class. You know, the very first time,
absolutely right.
The very first time you came on the show, I kind of asked you, it feels like the staff is maybe moving more towards recruiting interior offensive linemen that feel like interior offensive linemen. Right, for the longest time, it felt like we were lining 6-7 across the board. And there was really good offensive line groups with that. But it feels like you look at Corey, you look at Mandel, you look at Watts, if you get him, you look at Powell. It feels like there's been a concerted effort to find guys that fit that position from a height standpoint a little more traditionally. Would you agree there?
Yeah, 100%. I think I got to give Matt Perkins credit for this. He said, you know, sometimes those Joe Rudolph rooms looked like he had 9 right tackles, and like that was kind of how they went about their business, right? Like they loved 6'7", 280-pound kids who are athletic, and you know they made that work a lot, right? But sometimes then you're like, hey, can Trey Wettig play guard? You know, he's 6'7" and 330 pounds, so that's not always the best fit, right? But again, I don't want to. Sometimes it always sounds like you're bashing the previous staff. You know, those guys did amazing things, right? And Joe Rudolph clearly knows how to recruit the offensive line and develop offensive linemen. But a lot of times, you know, you looked up and down and it was a bunch of 6'7" guys, and then you're trying to have them fit in at guard. And then, can this guy also play center? I think that you're correct in saying they're looking at, okay, this guy's a tackle, but then we think these guys are interior guys. So I think they're lumping them into two kind of separate categories where, if you look at this class, Davenport, yeah, he's a tackle. But then Watts, he's an interior guy. They feel like Powell is an interior guy. And then obviously Michael Roski, he's a tackle. I mean, the guy's 6'8". He's going to play tackle. So, you're seeing that. And like you talked about, you saw that in the 2024 class. Ryan Corey is pegged to play on the interior. Ryan Corey is not going to play right tackle, at Wisconsin unless something just completely wild happens. Emerson Mandel is an interior guy. He will play guard, or if he doesn't play guard, he'll play center. So I think that is accurate in what you're saying. I think it's a good thing. I really do. I just think it's tough to recruit a bunch of elites in your, mind, 6'7" kids, and then just see if they can squeeze in and play guard. Whereas, if you're projecting at the high school level, okay, this kid's about 6'4", and we think that this is where he's going to end up, he's a guard for us. So I think it's different, and I think it's the right move, in my opinion.
We're going to take a very quick break, come back. We have a bunch of questions for Jon from the chat and that we had before. Talk a little bit about what's coming up this weekend as well, and a few big targets still on the board. Obviously, Badger fans excited about a certain recruit potentially hitting tomorrow. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers, but a quick break for our friends of the show. And a quick second, just say thank you. Thank you to everybody tuning in. I'm up at the cabin, so, lighting tech is a little weird, but we really do appreciate y'all. Appreciate Jon jumping in as always, and thank you for helping us build this community up. All right, let's get Jon back on. Really quick, Jon, coming up this weekend, a couple defensive linemen. What are the thoughts coming up this weekend? What are you looking out of this Badgers staff this weekend with the players coming in and the kind of the holes left in this class that they still need to fill?
Yeah, their spots are kind of at a premium right now, right? I mean, they're at 18. I think they'll get to 19 within the next 24 hours ish. I think this class can get, into 23, 24, maybe 20, maybe 25, at the absolute highest. There's some guys out there that are absolute, you're taking them no matter what. We talked about Trey Poteet. I think Cade Petrak falls in the same category. So, but to kind of get back to your question, this weekend, you're looking specifically at, defensive line, where Wisconsin's bringing up, two pretty significant guys. One is Drayden Pavey, who I think he's more of that true nose defensive tackle, line up over the center, maybe that zero technique. And then Kyler Garcia, who's more of a 4 or 5 technique guy. So they'll have both on campus. I think that's strategic in one way because you want to maybe put a little bit of pressure on Wilnerson Telemock, who took an official visit to Wisconsin, took one previously to West Virginia, and he is expected to decide on June 18th. So maybe he says, hey, look, if I really want to go to Wisconsin, they got 2 guys on campus right now. Maybe I speed the process up a little bit. But I think if they miss on him, it's not out of the question that they would try to take both the tackles that they have on campus right now. I shouldn't say tackles. I should say defensive linemen that they have on campus right now, which would get them up to 3 with Torin Pettaway. And like I said, if Petrak wanted to commit from today up until December 20th, whatever signing day is, he has a spot in this class, without a doubt.
Yeah, his film is awesome, man. I love Petrak's film. With Pavey, and he's the 6'3", kind of 300-pounder. To your point, looks more just like that interior guy. I kind of like Garcia's film maybe a little bit more, but I almost feel like Pavey fits a bigger need for what the Badgers haven't really found on their roster.
I think that you are 100% correct, and I think Wisconsin feels the same way. Depending on some of the guys that they have right now who aren't moving in the direction maybe that they had hoped for them to move. So I would agree with you. Like if you told me you can only take one, I'd probably take Pavey every day of the week because I think you need that, a bigger body, a true plug. And they've brought in some of these guys who are kind of, under the defensive end umbrella. I think it's more difficult to find those big 6'3", 300-pound guys who can move well, can do enough of the things that you want in that defense for them to get. So I think in a perfect world, Wisconsin, gets Telemock, and then they kind of get choosy about the other one of the two that they have on campus right now, but we'll see how those dominoes start to fall. Recruiting is very much about that first piece falling and then the rest falling behind them.
Do you subscribe to the theory? I've heard this talked about with other staffs and people kind of in the industry, that you want to leave a spot or two open so you can poach somebody late, or is that not something that is really a thing? If you get your plan A's, does it really matter?
Yeah, that's tough because look, I think it depends on who's on your board, right? And Wisconsin is in a really healthy position right now where there's some really good plan A guys that are out there who are still realistic that they would add. So like if you're able to add some of these guys that are still on their board right now, then you don't keep additional scholarships. But if you're like, hey, like a Javin Gordon, right? Let's say, they miss on Byron Lewis, and obviously they've canceled that visit to Gordon and he committed to Duke. But like a guy like him, we're like, we like this guy, but we're not over the moon about him. We don't feel like he's, and maybe it's a bad example to use him specifically, right? I mean, it feels like I'm kind of dumping on the kid, but like, he's not like a no doubt every day of the week, yeah, we take him type of guy. So, but they do have those guys on their board. I think they will continue to load them and not save spots because they feel really good about the guys that they're still battling for. I don't know if that makes any sense. I feel like I talked around for a little bit there, but like in terms of the guys that they have realistic shots with right now, they're going to take them and not worry about, having room for a portal guy or having room for a late bloomer in the fall because, there's some really talented kids that they can still land and they will absolutely take and then not think twice about, what might happen in the fall.
I mean, I'll just take a second to say, as a Badger fan, like I'm over the moon with this, right? Landing a bunch of these Plan A guys, beating Oregon for a linebacker. I mean, I'm not an unbiased voice here. I do this podcast. I try to keep it real, but like, this is awesome. This is super exciting to have this type of talent coming through and to be filling up at this point with Plan A type guys. So it's very exciting as Badger fans. We're all kind of excited. A couple comments here I want to get to. John, first of all, this one's just from Danimal. John Max, an all-star. Thanks for the time, John. So pass that one along.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you.
Couple comments here about Eugene Hilton. Many comments about Eugene Hilton. Everybody, Logan Couch says, let's freaking go. We're getting Eugene Hilton tomorrow. What can you tell us on, at least on this type of forum, about Eugene Hilton, his game, and kind of maybe where you see tomorrow headed?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing going into when I was able to talk with him on Sunday was, or the one question I wanted to get answered was, are you visiting Georgia the following weekend? And I asked him, we talked about the visit and stuff. And I said, okay, what do you got next coming up this month? And he said, well, I think I'm done. I think I'm going to be done with visits. Right there, the bell start kind of clicking in your head, like, and this is not just a Eugene Hilton type thing, but if a guy says, yeah, I think I'm done after he takes an official visit to school X, then a lot of times it looks good for school X. So, but that Georgia visit was kind of looming, right? And obviously, I spent time talking about, Wisconsin's not afraid to get in battles with, some of the best schools in the country. Well, Georgia recruits at just a different level. So if Georgia wants a kid, Georgia's usually going to come away with that kid. So I think that was the biggest question I got answered on Sunday, was that he wasn't going to take any more visits. He didn't visit anywhere this past weekend, and obviously his commitment's coming up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Nothing else scheduled. Announcing his commitment tomorrow on Friday, and if you look at the future cast and stuff like that, it looks good for Wisconsin, but we'll see where he announces on his own. But in terms of what he brings, when I talked to him too, he's like, hey, Wisconsin has Cam Miller, and he's their slot guy, and then they feel like I'm the guy who can complement him very well. I think Wisconsin loves the versatility. I don't know that he's a true boundary like a Muiz Sankara is, but he's a guy who can do a little bit of everything for you. I think my biggest takeaway with Hilton is the contested catches. If you watch the film, his ability to come down with the football in traffic is awfully impressive. And I could say that, he's really been Wisconsin's top receiver target. I think he can go all the way back to the fall, right? And I think the biggest reason Wisconsin's in the position that they are right now I should say two, that they are right now is the consistency that they've shown in his recruitment and really the work that Pat Lambert has put in, because Pat has connected the dots from Mike Brown to Kenny Guyton, and he was the constant there because they obviously went through a coaching change at wide receiver. And, Pat Lambert, I think, was the glue to hold that together. Now, Hilton loves Guyton. I asked him about Guyton, and, they have connected obviously extremely well, but that's the kind of work that gets done behind the scenes with a guy like Pat or Max or Casey or, from their crew, where if you're going to have a transition on the coaching staff, there's someone there as the glue to keep that connection together. And that's extremely, extremely important in recruiting.
Yeah, it's certainly not the first or last time I hear compliments about Pat Lambert keeping these together, or connecting dots, or, being that communicator. Yeah. Everybody just raves about those two, and Casey as well. It's a very highly regarded, from the people who cover it like you to the recruits that talk to him to the parents. Everybody just raves about that group. Question here about, let me see here. This is from Lord Croy. Most important target left for us to get a commitment from. And maybe that is Hilton, who we just talked about, but maybe it's one of those other guys who is a Plan A guy that the Badgers have had on campus, and we're kind of waiting for the decision.
Yeah, that's a really good question. With Pettaway now in the mix, right? There's not glaring holes in this class. You look up and down, they've addressed just about every position, right? So, there's not okay, then this is the one spot that they still have to target. In terms of importance, yeah, a guy like Hilton, I think, fills a big hole for you there, and just in terms of Wisconsin being able to recruit high-end receiver talent, it doesn't happen all that often. And I know that there's a guy who comes on your show who talks about recruiting receivers and not being able to do it and why it's so important. I certainly agree with him. So, this is a step in the direction with that. And, what Phil Longo eventually wants to do, I think if he can really get established at Wisconsin, it takes guys like Eugene Hilton. So, you can make an argument for him. Or you can make, you can make an argument for one of the two defensive tackles who are on campus right now, So I guess it kind of depends on where your heart is set on offense or defense. But like I said, with 18 guys, probably 19 tomorrow, there's a lot of holes that have been filled and a lot of needs that have been met. And now you're just kind of taking top guys available and, trying to fill up in those last available spots.
Let me talk to you about Byron Lewis just really quick, because I love the film. I think he's I've said it before, I think he's in that Dylan Jones type of class of talent, that Dupree class. I think he's exceptionally good. If they don't land Byron, which is going to be a battle, the Florida schools are after him, Florida State, Miami. Is this potentially a no running back class just because you brought in three guys last year, because it feels like it's easier to get running backs in the portal? Or do you think they'd pivot to find somebody else just to make sure they got a body there?
I feel very good about saying that it's Byron Lewis or bust. And that was, indicated to me before he took his official visit. And, we talked about Javon Gordon. His visit was canceled. We talked about John Forster. He's a 4-star running back from New Jersey. And usually those guys pan out pretty well in Wisconsin, but they canceled his visit. He was supposed to be here this weekend. So I can confidently say right now, it's Lewis or bust. The feeling from, Wisconsin was that if we are looking to add, and by we, I said them, with Wisconsin, they want a true game-changing elite running back in this class. And if they cannot get that, then they feel great about, guys who they got last year, and Darian Dupree, who I think is a perfect fit for what this offense wants to do. Dylan Jones, a true run between the tackles running back, and then Gideon Atuka, who's got a whole spring under his belt. And, that's a packed room right now. So, they didn't go into this class saying we have to have 2 or 3. I think that, that was something that they floated around, but I think they concentrated on one. And if it's not Lewis, I don't expect it to be anyone. But again, that could change in the fall, roster attrition, movement, there's all kind of moving parts. But the plan right now is to take Lewis or not to take anyone at all.
A couple more quick questions here. I've already kept you 5 minutes longer than I normally try to, but you have so many nuggets, man. It's hard to not ask all these questions. This one's from Adam. Would we take the receiver? There's prevailing thought that we're going to get Hilton tomorrow. I mean, obviously you got to see, but that's where the future cast, as you said, ever headed. Moise is out there. We talked about him. Do you think this potentially maybe Flowers or somebody else could be a 4 receiver class?
I don't see any scenario where it gets to 4. And then 3, too, I think that, once Friday comes, I think Wisconsin can reevaluate things, right? And I'm sure they're doing that already. So I don't want to, speak before something happens. But I think the staff would have a really difficult time turning down Tunkara. But again, let's say they get to 19 and they still need a few other guys in a few other spots, and you just don't have unlimited scholarships to play with. You have to start making some really difficult decisions. But Tunkara is going to be a guy that I'm certainly going to be asking about. Can you still take this guy? Is this guy someone that you're still going to really prioritize, or are there other spots that you feel are absolute necessities to close out this group? So I think there's zero chance it gets to 4. And looking at the question, they canceled Flowers' visit. He was supposed to be there for this weekend. But I do think it's a chance to get to 3. So, and that could very much be Tunkara or bust. We love the 2 that we got. We could make a room for Tunkara, but, let's say they miss on him. He goes to Kansas or he goes to Arkansas. I think they would just feel very good about 2 receivers and then move on to the 2026 class.
Question here about from Adam. Any merit Hardy Watts has gotten a little buzz to Clemson in a few spots. Anything on lately, either a connection there or where maybe Hardy Watts is leaning from a timeline or a school standpoint?
Well, I talked to him after his Wisconsin official, and I expect him to decide before the close of the month. I don't think is out of the question. He mentioned early July, but he's going to take that Michigan visit, and then I think he's going to be ready to decide. The thing I heard about Clemson was that he was only there for a short amount of time. Now, that doesn't mean that disqualifies them or anything like that, but something that Wisconsin was very much looking forward to was spending Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning with him, as opposed to, I think he was at Clemson for maybe just 24 hours. So again, that doesn't mean a whole lot, but in terms of what I know about the Clemson visit and then compared to what I know about how the Wisconsin visit went, just kind of different things there. So I'm not ready to put a future cast in at all for Hardy Watts until after that Michigan visit. But I know that Wisconsin absolutely knocked that one out of the park. I mean, he spoke really, really highly about the tradition, Coach Blas, everyone that's kind of involved. I think that visit really gave him a lot to think about.
This one's from Nick Flav. I think Torin could be a 4-star if he plays well his senior year. Do you think with the frame, and it's been reported he's up about 280, he's 6'5", 6'6", long arms. Do you think possibly he's got a 4-star upside there?
Potentially. You turn on the film, the background with him. He's really raw, right? So he hasn't been playing football for a long time. Obviously the junior tape was enough to garner a lot of offers. But if I were to come on here and say, he's going to be a 4-star, just wait till you see him in the fall. That's not something I feel great about saying. I think you look at the film, there's a lot of questions that come up in my head, at least. And I think that sometimes you talk about these guys and, everyone sounds great. And, when I talk about a kid positively, I feel that way. And this isn't a knock on Torin, but I think there's a lot that I saw in the junior film, and I'm curious to see how that translates to his senior year. But again, this is a kid that was a basketball player until someone convinced him to play football. And then he played football and got 10, Power 4 scholarships. So his best football is still very much in front of him. You can't teach a kid to be 6'6" and 285 pounds and be athletic. So, he's probably one of the guys who I'm most excited to see. And it's cool that I'll get to see him in person, in the fall. But he wouldn't be high on my list to say, wait, it's going to be a matter of time before he's a 4-star, because I think there's a lot that people want to see of that senior film, how he looks.
Well, and I got to segue off of that, but I'm curious, what's another guy that maybe Jon McNamara is incredibly excited to see the senior film on, just in the class in general?
Luke Emmerich. He comes to mind right away, because he's a guy who missed his entire junior season, or just about all of his junior season, and look, he came out and he blazed that, I think, 10.68, 100-meter dash time. And he's a guy that probably doesn't get it talked about enough because his recruitment was essentially like 3 weeks where he's injured, does have the Power 4 interest, goes and blazes this time on the track. 20 Power 4 schools come in and offer, picks Wisconsin, puts it to bed, and then it's like, okay, he's in. We don't talk about him anymore. But like, even in the conversation I had with, the official visitors today and Mason Posa today, he was a guy whose name just popped up out of the blue of like, hey, and Luke Emmerich too, right? I mean, his name just came up, and I can tell you that, there's certain guys in each class. Thomas Heiberger was probably one of them from the previous recruiting cycle where like, there are things that the coaching staff really likes about kids. And I think Luke Emmerich has a lot of those things. And, from a kid that didn't get a chance to play, he could be a guy where like, okay, yeah, once he gets some film out there as a senior, if he's healthy, he could be a 4-star. I think he falls in that category much more so than Pettaway does.
Oh, that's awesome feedback. Last question here, and this is more of a thought than a question, but I'm curious where you would go on this. I think there's at times two types of recruits rankings, right? There's what they are, 3-star, 4-star, but there's also like an importance ranking. So when you look at defensive linemen in the transfer portal and how hard it is to get those guys, how expensive they are, guys that don't even play big roles, you could argue that Torin Pettaway, a guy like that, he may be a 3-star when you look at the metrics and you line it across, but the importance to him, it's like a 4 or 5-star guy to get those defensive linemen because you can't find them in the portal.
Yeah, and like, you're kind of buying low right now, right? I mean, because those type of guys in 2 or 3 years in the transfer portal might cost double or triple. So I think just personally, it's very important to get them as high school players and then develop them, and hopefully that they stick with your program. And just in general, not a Wisconsin thing, but just in general, to get them into your program, establish them. Hopefully they progress in the way that you want to progress. Because like you said, Ryan, like if you go out and look for, portal defensive tackles, portal defensive ends, especially in the spring, someone said to me, it's like fishing in Lake Erie. If you're looking for defensive linemen in the spring portal. So, and look, we talked about like a guy like Rodis Johnson. I don't know how much he's going to make, but I'm guessing he got a good chunk of money. Gio Paez, I'm guessing he got a good chunk of money to play at LSU. And again, I don't know that dollar figure, but I mean, these guys were average players at Wisconsin. And then, a guy like Elijah Hills, there were a lot of Power 4 schools that wanted Elijah Hills, and he wound up at Wisconsin, and like, he's likely going to be a rotation player. And then, the kid that they just brought in, Lane, like, if you think he's going to set the world on fire, I don't see that happening. I think he's going to be a good piece, but that's the hardest position to attack in the portal because everyone is looking for them, and they are so overvalued that it's just wild. So I think your best bet is to find them in high school. They're not easy to find. It is the most difficult position to recruit in high school or the portal. So if you got a guy, you got to get him, you got to develop him and hope that everything turns out, because you just don't want to be going through the portal to get defensive linemen each and every year, because you're going to overpay. It's just plain and simple. You're going to overpay for these guys.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. And we're going to get you out of there on that, because we did get a good comment here. Robert Sorensen says, great info, John. Greg Linscombe says, if you keep John on much longer, he's going to need to move in with you. I know John has such great stuff. There's no room in the cabin, John. I'm sorry. This is not a big enough cabin to welcome somebody else. He is Jon McNamara, as always, incredibly gracious with his time. Go check out his work over on Rivals, Badger Blitz. John, any last thoughts? Anything I kind of missed, especially with the Mason Posa thing? Anything that still stands out from you with that recruitment and that decision?
Well, I mean, not a ton, right? But I would just say that I know that, I caught some stray bullets for this, but like, this was not a done deal yesterday. I can assure you of that. And that's why it's fun to follow recruiting, right? And, you go on a message board, you follow it, and like, I think I'm getting some pretty good stuff. So The Wisconsin coaching staff woke up this morning not knowing exactly where he was going to go. They had a feeling about it, and it worked out in the end. And, you know, it's just, when you get to hear kind of these behind the scenes things that goes on, it's stressful, it's fun, it's exciting. So I recommend anyone who's just kind of like, you know, dipping their toe into the recruiting water to just kind of dive head first, because you'll be hooked. I promise you that.
It is the reason why so many people follow and love college sports. It's the recruiting and the roster turnover. For everyone in the chat, thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate y'all. Thank you. And thank you to Jon. Go check out his work as well at McNamara Rivals on Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.